Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagin Sadrisham Tattvamajadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Iresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, one without a second, and the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome everyone. Today we are live in Pepe'ikeo, Hawaii, on the Big Island of Hawaii, and we have gathered here to continue on in a class that we started 2 weeks ago, which has to do with the gyana matra. Matra was an ancient Sanskrit word which could easily be substituted for our English word particle or atom. A very, very tiny particle, and when you put the word gyana in front of it, it means wisdom, or higher wisdom in this case. So it infers that just as in the physical universe we know that it consists now of many vibrating particles, we're also to infer that the great rishis of India and the thinkers that have come all the way up to present time, in the case of our own ideals here at SRV, Sharda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and Swami Vivekananda, that there must also be particles that are of a much subtler nature, and therefore we can call them intelligent particles. So this chart on my right I've put up again so that we can review a little bit what we did last week and hopefully finish it, because it has some things to offer us. We know that atoms and molecules and protons and quarks and neutrons and subatomic particles all make up the finer substance of the material universe. In the same way, the intelligent particle should have very subtle and refined constituents to it. And therefore, this chart tells us that it's all based upon the word. Now, that symbol there we see in Sanskrit is Om, and you can see written on Om basically Jagrat, our waking state, Svapna, our dreaming state, Sushupti, our deep sleep state, and then this Swara, they call it, or the Turiya state, a state beyond the three states of our awareness. We have, in one way of teaching in India, our waking and dreaming and deep sleep consciousness, but they posit those three states of our awareness in order to infer and point to or indicate this fourth state of our awareness called Turiya. They didn't want to burden us down with some very long words. Turiya just simply means the fourth. And so it's a very simple designation they've given the word, which makes for very profound meditation on our part. That is, we can begin to see through the appearances of the universe and go towards what I just chanted, basically, that there's this samadhi, or this word called Brahman, which is a very high state of our awareness, which people can attain to if they do their practices. So these practices we learned last week are called sadhana, or spiritual discipline. Spiritual discipline is basically explained in India by the 4 yogas. There's a discipline that you do which consists of meditation. It's an 8-limbed yoga called Raja Yoga by the great founder or father of yoga, given that title by his votaries, called Raja Yoga, or Patanjala. It's actually named after him, Lord Patanjali. And then there's a sadhana we do that incorporates our devotional aspect of our life called Bhakti Yoga. So you have then therefore Raja Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. There's a sadhana which then also is what we're mainly engaged in today, Gyana Yoga, which is the word here on the chart, Jnana. Gyana means higher wisdom. And it follows the way of making distinctions between essential and non-essential things in your meditations and in your spiritual practice. Then there's a 4th yoga, of course, that we're all engaged in called Karma Yoga, and that's the yoga of action. So those 4 yogas correlate nicely with the 4 kinds of temperament: the studious person, the reflective person or contemplative person, the active person, and the devotional temperament. These 4 yogas and these 4 temperaments cover a wide range for us, and that is, you say, maybe be what we come here to study, all falling under that nice category or umbrella called sadhana. Very important word. So beings who are ready to go beyond the limitations of morals and ethics, people who are into taking vows, learning precepts of higher life, of spiritual life, called dharma, then they make a definitive turn in their life towards becoming a sadhika, a practicer of sadhana. So it's not enough just to know your subject mentally, you also have to have direct spiritual experience of it. It'd be sort of like jumping in the ocean and then walking away saying, I know water now. But actually you need to take your mind and in your meditation jump into the thought water in your mind next time and immerse yourself in the nature of water. What is the waterness of water? What is the goldness in gold, or the silverness in silver? The manhood in man, the womanhood in woman. As Vivekananda would say, there is an essence underlying all appearances which points more directly to your consciousness or your awareness and away from or transcendent of mere physical objects like water, made of water, earth, air, fire, and ether. So the minute you take on a practice, a spiritual practice, dharmically, as a sadhaka, you begin to focus on cosmic imperatives like this. That is, the kingdoms of heaven are within you, as Christ said. So you begin to ponder them and connect them up with your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state, and find out that there is a place where I and my Father become one, and that is Turiya. So this beautiful Om sign, which you see gracing so many ashrams in India, and really has found its way to many places in the world. For instance, when I was in my 20s, I was walking through Central Park in New York, and someone had spray painted Om on a big rock with white paint, and underneath the words Om Eternal. So somebody in New York, right there in the middle of the city in Manhattan, had become, as we say in Hawaii, akamai, or in the know about this word, which designates all of creation, out of which everything spills and out into which everything returns. That coming and going is not called birth, life, and death in India. It's called projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. So the connotation of these teachings, which are called triputis, triple teachings, like the AUM of Om, or the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep of Om, or the three worlds, the growth, the subtle, the causal world, those are all to be studied by the sadhaka, the one who's pursuing truth and who wants enlightenment, and therefore becomes free. As I just chanted, those who stay in constant recognition of the fact that Brahman is everything, they court illumination. And that word is called enlightenment. And of course, that's a great sloka out of the Viveka Chudamani by Shankara. Now, 2 weeks ago in a live streaming event, I meant to welcome all our live streaming visitors here today who have tuned in from around the world. I have some students in India and on the East Coast and the West Coast of America and other places in Europe. So we hope they're all joining us today. It's not maybe 1 or 2 in the morning there. You'd have to be very dedicated to get up and listen to 3 hours of gyana yoga in that case. But if you're all joining us live streaming, we welcome you, and here to Hawaii, which is in the mid-afternoon on a Sunday. It's nice to reclaim Sunday, because Sunday used to be a day where people put off all work and just thought about God, whatever their tradition might be. And of course, other traditions might use a different day for it, but generally speaking, Sunday has been a day where we become reflective, we sit, we contemplate our existence, maybe meditate, read some scripture. So here on Sunday every week in Hawaii, and when I'm at my mainland ashrams in San Francisco and in Portland, Oregon, up in the Northwest, we take Sunday to do a very deep dive into a different kind of ocean, an ocean of wisdom called gyana. Gyanam is gyana sagara, if you want. There's, of course, samsara sagara. Everyone's all too familiar with that. It means the ocean of suffering. And that is very difficult to escape. And then there's, of course, this ocean of wisdom, Jnanam Sagara, and then, of course, there's the ocean of bliss, Ananda Sagara, probably the most famous of all oceans. So, where rolls the stream of knowledge, bliss, and the truth that follows both, as Vivekananda says in one of his poems? We want to put our mind into that stream. Anywhere there's a stream, there's a focus. A focus of our consciousness is what we are trying to achieve. And so we get away from the habits of scattered mind, lazy mind, restless mind, which can become great distractions in life, what to speak of sadhana and spiritual life. So if we can reach this state of focused mind, one-pointed mind, ekagra it was called in yoga by the father of yoga, then we have a chance to flatline, if you get my gist there. That is, when you get into one-pointed mind, it's like one line. But there's a state beyond, just like here, it's called Turiya, there's a state beyond balanced mind or even mind that is called Niruddha in yoga. That means the line begins to drop out in places. You see it once in a while, then you don't see it anymore. That is, your consciousness is there, focused, even, flowing naturally. All of a sudden it goes away, as if it goes into some state that's indeterminable. And in that indeterminable state there is great bliss, if you can keep your awareness of it, that is. And then you come back into the recognition again of your ego, body, intelligence, mind complex, and you begin to see shapes and forms. And that's basically a rough description of how a person leaves consciousness of the world and the senses, turns off the senses and goes and drifts into this deeper state. If it's done in sleep, as waking and dreaming go, then it's not done consciously. Actually, you're taken over and you're going into an unconscious state, basically falling into dreams about nature and about form and so forth. But if you can do it in meditation, you can maintain your awareness and your concentration, say even this kind of meditation with a group of us right here. That's a form of meditation where you're disciplining your mind to stay awake and aware and acute and very focused upon the spoken word. Now the spoken word in everyday life is just average or normal mantra. But there are mantras that are flowing out from the Guru's lips all the time, as when I went to my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, in Portland, Oregon, when I was in my 20s and began learning from him. And I realized he was speaking a very lofty and elevated kind of mantra all the time. It was called wisdom or gyana wisdom, and that's all he ever spoke. He wouldn't really condescend to talk to you much about superficial things or mundanity. He'd always stay at this very high level, and that's where he preferred to live. So if a person does that, they generate a sort of atmosphere around them, and they begin to attract people. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when the flower blooms in the wood, then the bees don't need an invitation. See, they don't need an engraved mailed invitation. They'll come running when the flower's blooming. So in that case, when a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or others that we've heard of, even in modern times, began to bloom with these many flowers of many different hues, full of wisdom, full of the nectar of wisdom, you might say, or the nectar of non-duality, then the followers come. And at this time there's probably in the world some 4 or 5 million followers of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa spread across the world. So in that way, when a great disciple of his comes, like Swami Vivekananda came to the West in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions, then basically you have a precedent for gathering souls. And as I was saying recently, that's why we're all here together. If Vivekananda hadn't have jumped the ocean like Hanuman in the old times and arrived here in the West, then all of us would not be sitting here together with this opportunity to learn about the gyana matra. Gyana matra is not really a new concept, because words like anam and matra, particles, have been there in the ancient language, in the ancient Sanskrit, for time out of mind. They're actually eternal words. They're not words that had an origin, but just like we're talking about air, earth, fire, water, and ether, if you seek their origin, you'll find they're in the mind. Oceans are in the mind, fire is in the mind, suns are in the mind, worlds are in the mind, your ancestors are in your mind, the gods and goddesses are in your mind. Those are the kingdoms of heaven within. So the mind contains everything, in that way no beginnings and middles and endings occur in it. It's just one undivided, eternal, infinite, boundless ocean of awareness. Now, you might say we've found ourselves in it in the embodied state, but we often teach in Vedanta that the mind is different than the brain. If one encounters the mind, and one can have this opportunity of encountering the gyana matra, this very, very tiny atom in the sun of knowledge, you might say. Now, when we took it up 2 weeks ago, we talked about it being a kind of cell. For instance, if there are terrorist cells in the world right now, then we should counteract them with cells like this. There are also cells of truth lovers, of devotees of God, of meditators, cells of scripture studiers, cells of beings who are trying to do selfless service in the world. All of these, of course, are larger cells. When we talk about an infinitesimal part of that, we talk about, in this case, a more powerful part of it. That is, what is the power behind these cells to do their work or to accomplish their meditation or to understand the scriptures. The very power of understanding what I'm saying is coming from a whole collection of these intelligent cells within you right now. And that's what's allowing the mouth to speak, it's what's allowing the ear to hear, it's what's allowing the mind to formulate ideas, it's what's causing the ideas to flow across the ether as vibration and hit your eardrums. It's causing you to comprehend what I'm saying. This is the deep inspection one has to make around one's own intelligence. So you might say that the Gyana Matra teaching is very much hand in hand with the idea of Atma Vichara. That is, asking the question, who am I? You know, we've often said in our own spiritual circle here, SRV associations, that this, in order to know who you are, you have to know what you're not. And so when you begin to study what you're not, things like physical particles and elements and senses and body, and even your waking and your dream state, these are all add-ons, as it were. But when you begin to study the intelligent particle in you, you're getting to a light that shines off this word. So that's why the intelligent particle is very much interconnected with the word Om. Everything that you see around you is just a manifestation of Om. Everything that you don't see around you, that too is just a manifestation of Om. As the Mandukya Upanishad will tell us if you look into it. In just 12 slokas, one of the shortest scriptures in the world, also one of the most profound. All about this power of the word, which Christ was trying to tell John and some of the other apostles about. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Sounds like he's taught in 3 ways, isn't it? So there's another triple teaching. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There's 3 designations there. Everything great is made up of 3s. Everything flummoxing is made up of 2s. They're called dualities. So you need a 3rd way out. So in my tradition, a triputi, a triple teaching, like AUM of Om, is very important. So when we looked at this Gyana Matra chart 2 weeks ago, and I promised at that time for our live streaming audience the following Sunday, that is the Sunday after last Sunday, that we would continue on with this chart and finish it up. At that time we saw that, like any good cell, it has a cell wall. Now, the reason to bring out this aspect of the teaching, rather metaphorically, is to say that the cell wall of many souls of this day and age has become eroded. They're not remembering their past lifetimes. In yoga, they say if you accept gifts, if you get attached to possessions, and if you begin to believe that the world of name and form around you is the only reality, then it begins to distract your consciousness, and you don't have time to reflect on who you are, who you truly are. You don't have time to look into the past. So astronomers may look out in space to see where the physical universe came from, because they say if you look out in space, you're looking into the past, everything that happened in the past. But the yoga psychologist will look inside to see everything that's happening in a past as far as your series of births are concerned. So if this cell wall of the Gyana Matra becomes eroded in you, and is not kept strong and resilient, then you'll begin to forget your true nature. You'll begin to forget that I and my Father are one, or Tat Tvamasi, that thou art, or Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. You'll begin to forget the non-dual truth, and you won't be able to enjoy that nectar of non-duality anymore. And things will fall apart from there. It'll be very hard to keep your equilibrium without knowing your true nature. You'll fall into a series of dreams. Those are lifetimes, basically. So, if a person has to recall his true nature or her true nature as Atman, the word in Vedanta, then they'll begin to reflect on all of these past experiences in them. They'll begin to connect them with the events of their life, so that it's not a matter of randomness anymore, not a matter of coincidence, not a matter of serendipity, it's not a matter of luck or good fortune. It's not the work of God or a devil. It all has to do with your own consciousness, your own mind. And therefore, taking this practical approach, all of a sudden one begins to study and find out that just like there are billions and billions of particles inside of any given object, those all came from the many gyana matras or particles inside of your own mind. The gyana matra has this cell wall that consists of retentive memory. The word in Sanskrit is smriti, retentive memory. We looked at that last 2 weeks ago, and I used the example at the time of my own teacher who could recite the scriptures by heart when he was in his 90s. So he had no loss of memory as his body aged. He meditated every day, he purified his mind, he kept the meditation practice going, he realized the truth, he became a living, liberated soul called Jivan Mukti, or Jivan Mukta, and therefore he had all of this wisdom at the tip of his tongue all the time. He had made his connection within with the Divine Mother of the Universe. She's called Vakdevi, goddess of the Word. So all words were known to him, all triputis were known to him, and it became a matter of simply past mastership. Now that's going to be a soul that if it comes back into the body again, will bring that knowledge with him, and that's precisely why some souls, you might find in your lifetime if you look back, have very resilient memories, very good retentive powers. The minute they hear something, they can call it up and remember it, because it's already been realized in a previous existence. They're carrying it with them. They just have to bring it out, dust it off a little bit, and put it on the shelf, you see, in view, in pure view. So I won't go into it at depth right now, but this smriti or retentive memory is a part of that cell wall of the gyana matra that will serve one well, will resist the onslaught of ignorance or forgetfulness from lifetime to lifetime particularly. That's why we call it causal memory. That's here, smriti bedu. One of the facets of this great cell is smriti bedu. Not only do you have a memory of your past lifetimes, but that's a memory of who all the bodies and egos and that you took on that were not your true nature, isn't it? So there must be a deeper memory going on there. Smriti bedu means memory of causal states, like as if you were to go into deep sleep tonight, and then tomorrow morning you'd wake up with the memory of what you experienced in deep sleep. You would have seen your causal memory. Right now, it's a difficult task for most people even to remember what they had last week for dinner, or what they were doing last year at this time. So their physical memory, their brain's memory, is not very strong. But for a sadhika, a person who practices these methods, these yogas, and becomes resilient and vibrant, with whose gyana matra is vibrating at a very intense and refined rate, they can remember going into samadhi, they can remember dying consciously, they can remember taking human birth and choosing their parents and choosing their gender, and as Sri Krishna says in the Gita, picking up the thread of their yoga and just going on with a series of lifetimes, as if you were a bodhisattva who had taken a vow to go from lifetime to lifetime in service of God and mankind. the gyana matra would be heavily responsible for that, and you would have nurtured all of the gyana matras in your mind while you were living previously, right up to the time of your last breath, as you departed the body consciously. The gyana matra would be also your refuge after you departed the body, unless you were going into nirvikalpa samadhi, in which case you wouldn't need them. There's no need to remember anything except God, except Brahman at that time. So everything dissolves. And note that here, one of the aspects of the gyana matra is also arupa manonasha. It has a power to dissolve things. The gyana matra is actually responsible for the ability to dissolve worlds of name and form and time and space. So it's going to be very key to any being who wants to enter into samadhi. They're going to have this knowledge that there within me is this power to dissolve worlds of name and form. And it's got support, it's got structure, it's got resilience, it's got protective power. This cell wall also consists of a pervading quality. That is, if it sees anything, it can pervade into it. It can pervade the past, present, and future, for instance. Doesn't memory have that power to do so? Can't you remember things that you did before and recall them right now and also project into the future, things that are apt to happen? So the pervading power of the cell is also a part of its cell wall. We also looked at the sankalpa matra. It has a power to project. In this way, we mean that all the worlds of name and form in time and space have been projected by the mind. In Vedanta, you can't say God is a creator. You wouldn't be speaking a statement like that from the station of non-duality. You'd have to say God is a creator. This is actually a statement that Swami Vivekananda used. It's a creator. It doesn't create at all. It stays in an indivisible and absolute condition all the time. No need to create, no need to destroy. One of the great songs in India by Shankara, a great stotram, where he says, Namritjorna Shanka Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Majanma. No death have I because I was never born. Basically the first line. Namritjorna Shanka Name Jati Beda. I have no jati, I have no birth, no caste. And no death have I. Pita naiva and mata majanma. I have no father, I have no mother. I've never had a father and mother. So I'm an unborn, eternal, conscious being. Of the nature of Shiva. That is, he goes on to sing, Chidananda Rupaha Shivaham Shivaham. Chidananda, see, Chid, it's pure consciousness. He is the bliss of pure consciousness. He is Shiva, he is Shiva. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Shivaham, that's what it means. So this is a being fully aware of the eternal nature of consciousness, has identified with consciousness and has disidentified with everything else, which are just the manufactures or the evolutes of consciousness. The worlds of name and form and time and space are the evolutes of consciousness. Most beings don't know this. They're manifestations, expressions. Some philosophies have gone so far as to call them illusions, mirages. And the scientist brooks that conclusion when he sees an atomic particle changing at a billionth of a second. We'd have to say it doesn't have much of a life, does it? A billionth of a second is not very long to live. So if your whole structure of the physical universe that you're sitting in with the appearance of solidity is actually really vibrating and changing itself at a billionth of a second all the time, then probably you have grounds to say, I think I renounce it, or I think I'll proclaim it shunyata, empty. And now where's the fullness? Now I know that it's empty, now I have to go find the underlying substratum of this appearance. So if you embark upon that journey called the spiritual journey, then it'd be good to gather your little gyana matras together in a big force. There are different armies out there. There's the army of the march of diseases and old age. That's an army everyone has to face off. So it'd be better to have this army of gyana matra cells all collected together and working for your behest. Fully conscious all your life, and at the time of your death too, fully conscious. At the time of deep sleep, fully conscious. At the time of waking up, fully conscious. It's simply a matter of training yourself to be aware of subtle principles like this. Even the two words gyana matra are halfway there. You've made it halfway there when you hear those two words. That's the power of a word. And in fact, the power in a word is the gyana matra. It's intelligence itself. So, chetanas chetananam. That is nicho nichanam chetanas chetananam. Katha Upanishad says. Basically, that one reality is the eternal among non-eternal things, and it's the intelligence of the most intelligent ones. So those most intelligent ones have their gyana matras in a row. They have them there in a basket. The basket is called the great mind. And they can use them to recall from birth to death and death to birth, or as my teachers used to say, from the cradle to the grave, can use them to remain in awareness all the time. Actually, all the time means in an eternal moment. So, projecting power, all the worlds have been projected by intelligence. Pervading quality, once the world has been projected, then when you're looking around and seeing objects, you should remember that they exist of your own intelligence. Chit Shakti, the force of intelligence, is that power in your mind. Chit Shakti was a word given by the father of yoga for that power of intelligence, given a female designation, mother of wisdom. And also this retentive memory, smriti, and which goes deep into the causal memory as well. So very important to note the cell wall of this gyana matra and to keep that strong against all invasion. Invasion of old habit, the invasion of sleepiness, the invasion of restlessness, the invasion of brooding, the invasion of depression, the invasion of ignorance, root ignorance particularly, mula vidya. The invasion of convention, mundane human convention, the invasion of family and society and conventional religion. All of these are attacks upon the retentive memory of the cell wall. And the sadhaka, one who practices spiritual discipline, strengthens that divine memory. So that even into a causal state, that is in deep sleep state, or at the time of death, or when one's meditating on unmanifested prakriti, where are the sources of things? Where does water come from? Where does fire come from? Where does my intelligence come from? Where do the gods and goddesses come from? You're having to go into a causal state in your mind. You'll be able to do that. You'll be able to make that trip inside, called the spiritual journey. And you'll be able to do it sitting like this. Now, other things we didn't talk about yet is some of the other elements on the inside of the cell wall here, this retentive memory cell wall. That is, you could also go to a teaching like Pratibha, this intuitive intelligence that's there. We talked a little bit about it in terms of just speaking about it, but I thought maybe we could show you, if I can find it, a little better illustration of what Pratibha is. Now, Pratibha is defined as a kind of flint-like intelligence. Basically, Sri Ramakrishna said if a flint is placed in the river even for 100 years. You can take it out, and while it's still wet, you can strike it on a rock and sparks will fly. So he's speaking not just about the rock called the flint. He's talking about the intelligence of an illumined soul who, even if he hasn't been in the body for hundreds of years, comes back into the body, he still keeps that Smriti Vedu, that retentive intelligence with him. He comes back in memory of where he's been, where he's going, and who he is. Basically, that's it. In terms of where he's been and where he's going, he knows that it's all kind of a mental projection, like a dream movement in his own consciousness. So he's aware of his lifetimes as movements of consciousness. Others are not aware of that. They forget immediately they die. And so they're born in an ignorant state and grow up in ignorance and live in ignorance. That is ignorance of their true nature. There's endless proof to this all around us. But very few souls actually awaken, and the ones that do awaken are those flowers that are blooming in the woods. We run to them to get teachings about our true nature, so that we will awaken too. May all beings awaken. May all beings be satisfied. May all beings be fed, their thirst and their hunger satisfied. All of these prayers are prayers of compassionate souls who want you free of suffering. And free of suffering means not just dinner on the table every night, but being able to make a meal of wisdom. There are many things that the human being consumes. So make sure it's not just a healthy diet that you're consuming, because organic foods never enlightened anyone necessarily. Make sure that you have this pure wisdom as your fare every day, that you ingest it all the time, and when you ingest it, also digest it like your body would food. So the digesting power also here in the gyana matra cell. You can't expect to understand the words of the seers and the scriptures and your guru unless you bring your intelligence to bear, right? So your intelligence has to be honed and sharpened and put into the quotient. And then once it is, you can understand the most abstruse of scriptures, the most profound of teachings. Then it's a matter of course, that makes sense. So if you talk about that, you talk about the very power of the intelligent cell, Pratibha. Put it this way, there are other words in Sanskrit that are derivatives of that. For instance, you have here Pratibhasika Sata. That's this elephant, you see, who's being gripped by the alligator and has to call out for the savior to come and help him. So here, basically, in this illustration, you see the elephant is living in an unreal or apparent dream reality. He's not living in awake consciousness. He's walking around the lake, eating, spraying water, enjoying himself, and all of a sudden he comes into a problem, encounters a problem. That problem is called pratibandhika. The word bandhika or bandha in Sanskrit is almost like the word bondage in English, very much the same. So he encounters these problems of bondage that are there, lurking, underlying the waters of existence, ready to come up as problems, ready to spring up. So these are all forms of that word pratika, isn't it? So, or pratibha. So pratibha is self-aware intelligence. That would be the illumined soul. That would be the Trinity. That would be the seers. That would be the saviors or the avatars. And we mean that word in the Sanskrit sense, not the Hollywood sense. Or that would be the gurus or the preceptors. Sometimes they're called acharyas, those beings who can explain to you this apparent dream realm that people are living in and the problems that come up in it. Now you notice here there's one other very helpful item here. Pratibandhika bhava. That is, there's a discus that Vishnu is holding to throw at the problem, to sever the problem for you. And that's the power of intelligence which removes obstructions. So if you ask the illumined soul, what's the greatest form of compassion? He'll say, awakening people's intelligence so that they themselves can get themselves free, because no one else can free them but themselves. There's a beautiful sloka in our scriptures. It says, Sadanga yoga natu naiva shudam. Mano vinasha natu naiva shudam. Guru padesham natu naiva shudam. Basically, the self is not made pure by the six-limb yoga. The self is not made pure by destroying the mind's waves in meditation. The self is not made pure by bowing at the Guru's feet. The self is already pure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, if a soul knows this, then they know that all the kingdom of heaven lies within them, and then they have to go looking for those great yogic truths, one of which is all knowledge lies within you. I mean, basically, Patanjali and Vedavyas said it that way, and Christ said that the kingdom of heaven lies within you. But yoga says it, one of the great laws of yoga, great 7 laws, is all knowledge lies within you. So that knowledge is not just secular knowledge, it's not just intellectual knowledge, it's not lower knowledge, aparavid. Mainly it's this higher knowledge. It's this wisdom, it's this gyanam, and it consists of billions of little vibrating particles. Look what they're full of. You see. So they're full of pratibha, a flint-like intelligence. To give us a better idea, let's take these quotes. I'll read them to you since you probably can't see them from the distance you're at. One says, everything, the world, manifestations therein, enjoyment, suffering, departing, the power of conjuring, realms of name and form, can and should be directly designated and attributed to one's own intelligence. Other factors such as fate, destiny, karma, and even grace also reside within and spring from that self-same intelligence. So if you say, oh, Mother, shed your grace upon me, she would probably turn to you and say, I already gave you grace in the form of the intelligent particle. Use it. Save yourself. Don't bother me again. I gave you millions of intelligent particles. Now wake them up and vibrate them and get free. Why not do it right now, this very moment? Because the truth is, bondage is an illusion. You are free all the time. You just are dreaming yourself to be bound. And that would, of course, be the radical non-dual station that a seer would man. He mans that station. See? That's the man-making policy of Vivekananda, is to wake yourself up by the power inherent in yourself. So it could be that you'll have to meditate on a great savior. No doubt Vishnu, Shiva, Lord Brahma, those are high cosmic imperatives, maybe transcosmic imperatives. They're the Trinity. They're one of the highest lokas, one of the highest Akashas, one of the highest levels of consciousness that the human being can conceive of. They're really beyond gross form. You don't see them in gross form. So it's a matter of causal memory, right? I mean, if you have Smriti Bedu under wraps, then you're thinking Christ is eternal, Buddha is eternal, Krishna is eternal, Muhammad, Moses, eternal, eternal, eternal. Those words will never disappear out of the human mind. They're a go-to. In any lifetime, in any position you find yourself in, you can simply meditate upon those great beings, and they will be there. They're like great icebergs in the ocean of existence that never melt, even under the sun. They become so big, they've crystallized so into such hard principles that they cannot be melted. They will never disappear from the human mind. So that's God in form. But they are resting in the ocean of awareness, or ocean of consciousness. So they know very well they're surrounded by formlessness. And there can probably be no better way to understand formlessness than to understand intelligence. Have you ever seen it? You've seen its manifestations. Basically all of this is its manifestations. Palm trees, oceans, telephone wires, the rooster that just crowed out back. It's all forms of intelligence. But did you ever actually see the intelligence? And even when you see it working in great minds, can you actually see intelligence itself, or are you seeing its workings? So it's something that's very subtle. It's akin to the formless. It'll be the thing that dissolves, which is precisely what I'm trying to teach here. It has the pervading and projecting quality, but it also has the dissolving quality. It dissolves things. And you are the one that uses it to dissolve things. You dissolve this world tonight in deep sleep. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. You go into samadhi tonight without knowing it. You go into a formless state. Basically, there's 4 times when you do that. Deep sleep, death, a very good meditation, if you have one, and samadhi, the state itself, superconscious state. So those are 4 times when a human being actually proves to himself or herself that his nature or her nature is formless, with a capital F. The problem with 2 of those, that is deep sleep and death, is that you always come back from them a fool. You go into them, you get a great glimpse of who you are, but when you come out you forget, because your causal memory is not that strong. It's not, your cell wall is not that resilient against ignorance, and so you come out of deep sleep and you come out of death, that is, into whatever happens after death, or into your next lifetime, and you don't remember anything. So you're a fool. So you might say the aware human being goes into deep sleep as a god and comes out a fool, but the seer goes into deep sleep as a seer and comes out a seer. Knows it to be one of the forms of his own consciousness, one of the triputis of Om, deep sleep state, one of the levels of his consciousness. And if you're a sadhaka, then you'll start right now to begin to know your own consciousness. You probably already know it, but it's going to be a matter of reminding yourself with certain little keys that are back there. Like somebody asked me today, the 24 cosmic principles, Samkhya very much, that Lord Kapila brought out, how do they help me? Well, you use them as alambanas, you use them as supports for meditation. That is, you don't just look at fire and say, oh, how nice, warms my hand. Well, careful, it's going to burn my house down. See, or there's a forest fire nearby coming towards us, like last summer. Forest fire went by our retreat site, very close. So that's one way of encountering fire. See. But you can also begin to study the nature of fire, what its significance is, what its origin is, and therefore become a knower of fire. That's a very profound thing, to know fire. So basically the 24 cosmic principles, fire is just one of them, you see. So how can I use the 24 cosmic principles as ways to meditate upon my own consciousness and what it did with its intelligence? So I was inspired to say, yes, think of the spiritual path as a long path you have to set foot on, and there are 24 clues hidden along the way, you see. Now, if you had, before you set foot on the path, picked up a book on Sankhya Yoga, see, and studied Kapila's 24 cosmic principles, then you'd recognize those clues as you encountered them on the path, wouldn't you? But if you hadn't studied those principles, then you would be spending a lot of time searching for things that you don't know. You might even see one of them and not recognize it. So yes, wisdom's important. Yes, philosophy is important. Yes, study is important. Yes, words are important. Yes, scriptures are important. They're crucial. If you're following a spiritual path, they're crucial. Are you going to presume to tell me that you're already enlightened when you haven't even learned the 24 cosmic principles yet? Oh, I don't need that stuff. I'm enlightened. You're on a path. Maybe you haven't even set your foot on the path yet. So when you set your foot on the path, be armed with these great systems that Mother India, for one, has given you. Become aware of these teachings. Become aware that all this knowledge lies within you before you set foot on the path. Then once you set foot on the path, you'll start to recognize things. The same with your past lifetimes. Once you begin to meditate, you'll begin to recognize not who you were in any given lifetime necessarily, but the things that you experienced in a previous lifetime and why they make sense to you today, or why they give you trouble today. That is good karma, bad karma, and so forth. Good experiences, bad experiences from the past coming up now. Why? Where? When? What? Why is karma? Where is space? When is time? What is name and form? But what about the question who? The fifth W. Who? Well, intelligence gets to the who, you see. If you hone your intelligence, then basically you're finding out who I am. I'm the architect of this universe. Glad to meet you. See. We've heard enough about what's deluding you as the nature of my game. Now let's find out what's enlightening you as the nature of my game. You see. Devilish things come from what's deluding you, but bliss, love, light, compassion, truth, that comes from things that are enlightening you. Your own intelligence enlightens you. Call it up. Bring it forward. You're sitting in this room right now or tuning into me from some distant location because of your intelligence. Because your intelligence is compelling you to do so. You want it sharpened. You want it honed. You want it reminded. So, I say about the teacher, he's just a man sitting by a river selling water. See, I'm just trying to tell you, it's there already and in you, inside of you now. Just look inside and find it. Make those connections. So 24 clues along the path, find them, identify them, connect them in to you, to yourself, to your own actions, to your own karmas, and learn to dissolve them. That's going full circle. That is, as I've often said, it's nice to worship Lord Brahma. Thank you for the creation. Nice to worship Lord Vishnu. Oh, thank you for sustaining me. But don't forget to worship Lord Shiva. Thank you for destroying all of this, for dissolving it back into its source. Shivaham, Shivaham. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Don't forget that part of the Trinity. It's not a matter of death and suffering, it's a matter of the death of suffering. Isn't it? Everybody thinking, oh, Shiva must be death, he must be suffering. No, Shiva is the death of suffering. He wants you to awaken to your non-dual eternal nature as consciousness. Consciousness is unborn. Namrityorna Shanka Nami Jati Beda. I never died because, as Krishna says in the Gita, what is never born cannot die. The unborn cannot die. So this dissolving power is very important. This is what this chakra that Shiva is casting at this alligator who is bothering this elephant. That is the problems that come up in life. We wandering around in a dream state, and our highest meditations are prayers asking for help, and the help that comes in the form of this chakra. See? And if we knew that Vishnu is our very self is within us, then we would ask him, can you lend me that chakra for a little while? You see, I'll probably only need it maybe one lifetime. And I can cut away all difficulties. I'll return it to you later. Or you can just tell him, hey, give me that, it's mine anyway. You're mine too. You're my very own. Lord Vishnu, you're my very own. The power to sustain is in the gyana matra. And I'll never lose sight of my gyana matra. I hope none of you ever will again once seeing this chart. This is new, this is original, this has never been shown, this has just been created. But nothing new under the sun. That is, in that sun of knowledge, there are millions of these. And that sun of knowledge is your Atman. And those millions of bits of knowledge inside of you are these gyana matras. And with them, you have projected all of this. And with that same gyana matra, you should also dissolve it. The power of dissolving. Arupa means formless. Manonasha, everything that the mind created, it should abhinashi, it should destroy. It should be able to destroy. You understand the way in which I'm using those words, I hope. That is, everything that's created means everything that's projected, and everything that's destroyed means everything that's dissolved. When a wave comes up off the ocean, it's not created, and when it falls back into the ocean, it's not destroyed, simply because it's not ocean, but it is water, isn't it? It's not ocean, nor is it wave, but it is water. That is, ocean is its true nature beyond form, and wave is the assumption of a form that it took mistakenly, and water is its essence. So that is much like this, the power to destroy, to dissolve in the gyana matra. You can utilize that, and that's called dissolving the mind stream in some traditions. In other traditions, it's called simply Om. You can get a little shot on that chart. You can see that probably, and following Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's lead, there's no better example for Om than the bell. As you can strike the bell, the sound will come, but where does the sound come from? It's already inside the bell. It just takes a little bit of an effort. So in the same way, the little bit of an effort on billions and billions of souls, whether they be in this world or in the ancestor realm or in the realm of the celestials or in the realm of the gods and goddesses, a little bit of effort can produce a plethora of worlds, lokas, akashas, and they can also dissolve them after their use has been is over. After they've been enjoyed, after they've been explored, after they've been projected, they should also be able to be withdrawn by that self-same power, as the chant just told us. That very self-same power that's in the gyana matra. So when you look at a teaching like Om, as we were just doing, that's the sort of backdrop upon the whole gyana matra, is that word Om, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, the AUM of Om. Then you see that the bell is a very good designator for that. You see here some of these great eggs. You might call them Hiranyagarbhas, called the cosmic egg. So this egg lists all the various lokas. Call them the 7 lokas. Bur, Bhuva, Swaha. Does it sound familiar to you already? Bur Loka, Bhuvar Loka, Svar Loka, Mahar Loka, Jnana Loka, Tapar Loka, and Brahma Loka are the 7 worlds. Notice how they all emanate out of the bell. The bell would signify Om. Or, as Sri Ramakrishna said, the sound Tom, T-O-M, the sound that comes out of the bell. So when the great Om is struck, as it were, if we want to use it metaphorically, basically all the worlds would come out of it in vibrational form. Doesn't it make sense with the idea of science and vibration? See? Or any philosophy like the Tantra and its Shrishti Rahasya, its secret of creation, being in the vibration, or the secret of the Vedasis when they were talking about Ritam and the truth, which vibrates continually. That is basically this word, this great word. So you can put it in terms of lokas, but over here you're putting it in terms of all these cosmic principles we just talked about, tattvas. Out of Om comes the Mahat, the great mind. The intelligence comes from that. Intelligent particle very much then involved with the very inception of form. Very inception of form. No doubt that this intelligence here, as it gets down to the Burloka, earth world, or toward the gross elements, then it looks less like intelligence, it looks more like physical objects, matter. It's not acting intelligent anymore. It's lost some of its light. But from the cosmic mind to the buddhi, the intelligence, to the ego, to the mind, to the subtle elements, to the subtle senses, to the gross senses, and to the gross elements, basically there's your march in evolution fashion. Because if it's taken back in and dissolved, it would be involution. So basically, the bell is sounded, evolution has begun. As the tone rings, evolution is underway, life is underway, and as the bell, as the sound dissipates and returns to its source back in the bell, then involution is underway, and dissolution is the result. So basically you have creation, preservation, and destruction, right? You have AUM of Om, and always ending back in the power of dissolution, back to the source. Now, another good teaching about the bell is that you could say, well, I'm striking the bell, doesn't the sound of the bell just diffuse out in the air? It doesn't really return to the bell, does it? But that's a good point to explain root ignorance. That is, we think that everything is dissipating in nature, like, say, a Big Bang. As soon as the Big Bang is over, the waves just die out and everything dies. There's nothing sentient then underlying it. There's no intelligence underlying it. It's all material. Or the intelligence comes from the brain, and when the brain dies, intelligence dies with it. That kind of idea. But to know the source of the bell's power is to know that the power inherent in the bell is just like Pratibha. It's just like the very force that caused the bell to be struck, the very impetus that caused the Big Bang to make its appearance. Where is that coming from? So you're beginning to trace a source not outward, but inward. That's the law of vibration. Because if you trace a vibration outward, you'll find out it begins to distort. You can measure it, and it begins to fall into fragments and pieces, and then it's called distortion. Distorted tones in a musical instrument, for instance, they diffuse and they distort, and if you could measure them beyond the ear's power to hear, you would hear how they turn into overtones and fragmentations, and a kind of cacophony occurs from that until they finally just dissolve. But the sound of the string before it was struck, you see, that's what I'm interested in, where the music emits from, in its most harmonious form, not in its disintegrating form. See? So if I'm going to trace the source of the bell, I'm going to trace it back to its potential to strike. That is, the potential of everything in nature is back in the cosmic mind, Mahat, the great mind. And that's a matter of intelligent principle. So that's another way of looking at the sound of bell, Om, eternal. The worlds and the principles both. You can look at it both ways. You can also look at it how we just looked at it in the Gyana Matra chart, the three states of your awareness, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. is also there in the bell, and so is Turiya, the fourth state. Or you can look at it in terms of sheaths, upadis, or they call this sharira. That is, the linga sharira, the sukshma sharira, and the karana sharira are your three bodies. Most people think they have one body. But remember, you have a dream body tonight, and you have a deep sleep body. And if you want to put it in terms of shariras, which means a kind of sheath or container, then basically you have to say I have a linga, a gross body, I have shukshma, a subtle body, and then I have karana, a causal body. And intelligence would hook all these together. That is, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, Chetanas Chetananam, would know that he has three bodies, not just one. And those three bodies belong to three worlds, and they also correlate with the three letters of Om, A-U-M. They also connect with the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. They also connect with the power of intelligence in the Trinity, the power to project, sustain, and withdraw, or dissolve all the worlds. So you're looking at a series of threes that are intimately connected, intrinsically connected, all evinced by this simple example of a bell. Now, down here you have the 5 Akashas I put in. That is, basically you have Bhutakasha, which is roughly equivalent to the Burloka. Then you have Pranakasha, a space of energy, not kinetic energy, not the energy from lightning, not electric energy. The energy that Christ mentioned when he said man does not live by bread alone, that kind of energy. The energy that I'm raising my arm with, the energy that I'm able to speak with, and the energy that's causing you to hear by the power of vibration across the ethers into your eardrum. That's a kind of prana. See, that's the subtle energy. It's more animate than these other forms of energy. So that's an akasha, that's a space within you. It's actually where your ancestors live, in the pranakasha. That is roughly equivalent with the bhuvar and svarlokas. Now there's another chit akasha, which means the space of mind, the space of thought. Chit means thought. Everything is full of chit, as we often say humorously. And so it's just this hope that we can purify that a bit, so that our minds are pure, and we're thinking high thoughts. So chit akasha is this space roughly equivalent with these maharlokas, so forth, also correlative with the celestials and beings in higher realms, higher heavens, not lower heavens, but higher heavens. That's a space of mind. So those beings have a sukshma sharira. They're living not in the linga sharira anymore. They're living in the shukshma sharira. A causal body, a subtle body. They're living in a subtle body. That's what you take on after death. The prana leaves out of the silver thread connected to the navel, empties out into a pranic bubble. Pranic bubble, this is all happening inside, not outside, by the way. Pranic bubble goes looking for another host, chooses its parents, chooses its form, chooses its gender, and so forth and so on. They've known this for thousands of years, that that's what happens after the soul dies, after the body dies. Dies means goes back to the elements, which are eternal. Everything's eternal. There's no such thing as death. You just have to have a word to designate the end of things. But the end of things is the beginning of the next thing, you see. Everything's cyclic. Time is cyclic, space is cyclic, the sound is cyclic, Om is cyclic. The only thing that isn't cyclic is your true nature, Brahman. That's why Buddha sat under the Bo tree for 49 days to get out of cycles. One of his last teachings was, everything returns like the river. But you have to get out on the banks of the river to know that. Once you get out on the banks of the river, see everything return, then you say, this is no fun. I'm just repeating the mistakes of the past. I'm just repeating the injustices of my forefathers. I'm just repeating the whims of the gods and goddesses. That's repetition. I don't want that. I want free, liberation, emancipation, moksha, mukti, kaivalya, samadhi, satori, fana, beatific vision. It's been said in so many ways by so many different kinds of souls in so many different religions that it's past doubting anymore. It's beyond mere belief. It's a matter of faith now. So in this way of thinking, you have these akashas, or these lands inside you. There's also one made of gyanakasha, you see. Now, there's where you come back to the particle. You see, gyanakasha is a space, akasha, made of wisdom. Now, you don't need to drop your body to live there. I saw my teacher living there for decades when I met him. He was just in the gyanakasha. So now we have these jokes, 3 men walked into a gyanakasha. I used to say 3 men walked into a bar. That was the beginning of a joke. Now it's like, 3 men walked into a gyanakasha. That is, they went into meditation, met each other, and enjoyed the wisdom that was inside of themselves. And they came out of that gyanakasha, and they came back to their senses and their bodies and just went about their business, you see. But when they went into the gyanakasha, they walked into a bar there, and they were served nectar, and they drank and quaffed that nectar. It was the nectar of wisdom. It was full of little bubbles, like a foamy drink. That foamy drink, those bubbles were all gyana matras. They were drinking their own wisdom. And they got very elated and blissful. And then they came back to tell us about it. There, beyond that barrier, is this land called the Gyanakasha. That's where the seers, the saints, the sages, the savants, the seers, the saviors, and any other S word you can think of, that's where they go. Not just when they drop their body, but in their deepest meditations. So the Gyanakasha isn't a space somewhere far away outside of you. It's not up in space, and it's not necessarily anywhere, somewhere you have to go deep inside of yourself to find either. You're sitting in it right now. So the house is made of intelligence. The tree is made of intelligence. Your body is made of your own intelligence. The food you eat is your own intelligence. I've had that experience myself. That's something I can attest to. I've actually been in a state of mind where I saw that the food I was eating was my own intelligence. I was eating a green Thai curry. So I started calling, Green Mother. It's the green Tara curry, you see. Because I saw that she was just feeding me food made of wisdom. So you can get into such a state that you begin to actually see intelligence pervading everything. And it's very close to beginning to see how Brahman pervades everything. As we just chanted. Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Sthitireva Moksha, liberation. That Brahman pervades everything. It's in everyone, in everything. Not a form, and it's not a name, and it's not an object. If you have that as your rule of thumb, then you can look for Brahman. Remember, it's in everyone, but it's not a form. It's in everything, but it's not an object. So if you follow those rules of thumb, the Advaitic non-dual truths, then you'll be able to search out Brahman, even here in this very body. Because there's actually a sloka that says that. It's here in this very body. Satyena labhyastapassa hyesa atma samyagyanena brahmacharena nityam. You probably all know the chant, I hope. So, right there at the Gyanakasha, you're beginning to comprehend that everything is made of your own intelligence. And you should come back from that state of deeper awareness here into this body, into this world, into these senses, into this gathering, into this island, into this ocean, into this world, in knowledge of that fact, and never forget it again. Because if your intelligent cell is intact, you will have perfect memory, retentive memory, and you'll even have memory of a causal state you were in. You'll remember the last time you went into ecstasy. You'll remember the last time you went into deep sleep and how peaceful it was there. No ego, no children, no cell phones, no money, no banks. It was all peaceful in your deep sleep state. There wasn't even a you to worry about. There wasn't my death to worry about, or my survival. All of those things went away, and I was just myself. That's what Christ called the peace that passes all understanding. It's actually a state that comes upon you where you feel that everything is fine and perfect. And that always was the case, and it never will not be the case. I'm now living in the realm of gyana Akasha, you see. So that's the import of this power to dissolve and the power to project the worlds. Now, if you want to look at it in the remaining minutes before our break, in terms of dissolving the mind stream, this is another very beautiful chart which gives us a look at that dissolution process that the intelligent particle is so involved in. Now, in the remaining few minutes, well, maybe after the break, we can look at this chart some more, but basically just to say that using Sri Ramakrishna's words in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, he says, when a sugar cube dissolves into hot liquid, it first breaks in half, then into small chunks, then into granules, and finally there is nothing left but sweet liquid. Similarly, when the mind moves towards authentic meditation, it first contemplates the dual world, then the many teachings, then the living particles of its own intelligence, and finally enters full immersion. What remains then is one blissful, indivisible, homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, or a really nice, tasty cup of tea, if you prefer. So this analogy used by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, or this statement that I fashioned from it, basically explains the projection of the worlds through intelligence, the sustenance of the world, and the withdrawal of the world through intelligence. Now, we're used to thinking in terms of long spans of time. You have to think in terms maybe that time is an illusion, that actually time is making things drag. Time is making things go so slow, physically speaking, that you cannot catch up to the speed of your own intelligence. Your intelligence works like a snap. That is faster than the speed of sound is the speed of light. It's faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought. And faster than the speed of thought is that underlying intelligence that gives rise to thought. That's immediate. That's more like God. One of the words for God in our tradition is Sat Chitananda. So Chit is that intelligent part, you see. That's the intelligence with a capital I. So the very nature of divine reality is pure existence, pure intelligence, and pure bliss. Take your pick, probably 3 different schools. But they managed to put them all together into one beautiful word, designation for divine reality, Satchidananda. So the intelligent particle is what we're talking about here, very much involved with the projecting, sustaining, and dissolving of worlds in space and time. You can do it in a coma. That is, you'll go into a coma and 2 years will go by and you'll think that maybe a day went by. Or you can do it in Rip Van Winkle syndrome, in a story. You can do it in a meditation, and that's the best way you want to do it. Probably you shouldn't wait a whole lifetime to do it. That is, at the end of your life you think, oh, I just projected the worlds and now I'm leaving them. That's kind of too late to do anything about it by then. So it's probably better to think, I think in my meditation I'll sit an hour and I will see how my mind projects the worlds, how it sustains them and how it destroys them, how it dissolves them back into me, because that's what's happening when I wake, when I dream, and when I go into deep sleep. That's happening all the time. And that only took 12 hours, didn't it? So let's see if I can take what I do in 12 hours and take it down into a 1 or 2 hour meditation. And when you do and you accomplish it, then you'll feel this peace come forward. You'll feel your vibration of your intelligence get honed, because the more you do it, the more you remember how it's done. And the more you remember, I am the doer. It's probably the one time when you can be proud of that statement. In all other ways you want to probably say, I'm not the doer. But in that way you can say, if I'm my own intelligence, now I know I'm the doer. I'm the one that's doing this. And I'm mastering it. So I will leave you with that to think about for our break. And I'm supposed to make an announcement that during the break we will turn off the mic while we talk, so you won't hear our conversation, but we'll focus the cameras on these charts for those of you who are live streaming so you can study them closer up. So let's take 10 or 15 minutes or so, and we'll be back to the live streaming and to this class at that time. Thank you very much. Om Tat Nayo. Om Tat Nayo Rafrini Mahe Gatong Yagyaya Gatong Ye Nupataye Daivi Swastirastu Naha Swastir Manusebhyaha Urdvam Jagatu Bhesajam Samnovastu Dvipade Samchatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we offer all unto the Great Self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Vasudeva Sarva, Vasudeva Sarva, Ekameva Dvaitiyam, Vasudeva Sarva, Vasudeva Sarva, Vasudeva Sarva, Suridam Sarva Bhutanam, Vasudeva Sarva.